Hi, I'm Jason Fisk.
And I'm Mike Tarsella of Team National. Our group finished fourth in the MarkStrat simulation over the summer session. As the graphic shows, we started the contest first overall in period one and held the position of either first or second 3 times during the course of the simulation. But we ended the competition a disappointing fourth overall in share price and third overall in unit sales after faltering in the course's final week. But we really thought we would have done better than that.
We started with our Noon and Nova products, which are focused on shoppers and high earners markets. In period four, we also added Nolo to target the savers market, and later Note and Knox that focused on explorers.
Noon was our bread and butter product for most of the 6-week game. Due to our misfortune in period 6, it accounted for all of our profit that period. As we began the simulation, we found success as this product most closely aligned with shoppers' ideal values. And after a fairly slow start, we initiated an R&D project for Noon in the second period, closely matching expectations in the segment, especially as they related to power and price. And it worked. We gained significant share in short order. Noon was the product leader overall by period 4, and we sold 1.5 million Noon units overall, far more than anybody else. Even though we lost some share toward the end, Noon was still the highest revenue brand in the simulation, and we had a market-leading 13.3% of the Sonite sales. Nova began the simulation most closely aligning with high earners' ideal values. This product held the number 1 or number 2 market position in the segment up until the final period. And we were able to charge a slightly higher price than our competition because this was a high-quality product. Unfortunately, we made several mistakes in period 5, which we'll talk about shortly. Nova ended the period a distant number 3 in the high earners market, and it detracted from performance in the final period. So next is Nolo, our offering in the savers market, which started as an R&D project in period 3. Our strategy was to align with customer expectations based almost entirely on power and price. We attempted to create a very low-priced, high-powered product that we thought would take share. But after positioning this and repositioning it, we were never competitive here. And we finished a distant 5th in the market with 55,000 sales over the final 3 periods.
Lastly, there was the Note/Knox product, which targeted the explorers market. We had taken out a loan in period 3 to fund this R&D project. Everything we looked at suggested we could take a big share here. Because the dominant player in the market didn't align well with the market expectations. By the time we released the product in period 4, another team had already launched a successful product that quickly grabbed the market with their first mover benefits. Because of this, we were never a big factor in this fairly small market niche and pulled the product in period 6 to avoid further losses.
Right, next, let's look at the top 10 lessons we learned from the MarkStrat game. First, it pays to aggressively go after the most attractive market and establish your position there as soon as you can. That's what we did with Noon with success. We had a cumulative growth rate in the mid 20% range, and this market segment was important, dwarfing the others in unit sales by period end. Lesson 2 is counter to lesson number 1. It's don't spend a lot of money on markets with little to no growth. This speaks to what we did with Knox. We underestimated the risk of not doing well enough in a lackluster explorers market. And we learned the hard way, in this type of market, there's no rising tide to lift your boat. Lesson 3, even very price-sensitive shoppers can perceive your product as cheap. Again, our goal with Nolo was to focus almost entirely on high power, low price, and not worry about design, display, or those other factors. And that just didn't work. It was a mistake. Lesson number 4, it's a saying used by traders: cut your losses and let your winners ride. And we repeatedly made the mistake of thinking we could fix Nolo and Knox, our savers and explorers offerings. And honestly, I think we would have been better off to pump more of that budget into Noon. Lesson 5 is get a lead and keep a lead. In hindsight, I think we should have taken a bigger loan and started our R&D projects at least 1 period sooner. I think the market will reward you taking big risks. but they'll reward you more if you have that first mover advantage. Lesson 6, consumer product expectations do change over time, so you need to prepare for that by predicting where things are headed. We learned this especially in the high earners market, where the need for power slowly declined period by period. And that made our decision to go for an R&D project focused on power a mistake. Lesson 7 is simple. More is not always better. Just because consumers are choosing products based on, say, power, you're not going to win by turning power up to 11 on your product, because some consumers are turned off by too much of a particular feature. They don't want to buy what they don't think they need. Lesson 8 is do not skimp on ad research. Simple lesson, but we skimped on it late in the period, and that hurt us. Lesson 9 is to try to strike gold at least twice. We needed at least 2 outright segment leaders to win, and we only had the 1. And lesson number 10 is a good one. It's to continue to seek advice. I think we got too confident after taking the lead in period 4, and we didn't ask for more advice from the professor or anyone else, and I think that hurt us.
Now let's take a look at what we learned in the simulation regarding key areas of marketing management. Concerning targeting, Chapter 7 taught us that we can't be all things to all people. MarkStrat took this a step further. We learned that market segments may share some characteristics, but they are distinct for a reason. With Nova, we made the big mistake of going after 2 segments late in the simulation. We were correct in analyzing that these 2 distinct groups were coming closer together in terms of ideal values, but what about like psychographics, their attitudes, personalities, lifestyles? These 2 groups were segmented for a good reason, and we shouldn't have targeted them together. We lost an amazing amount of share by trying to target both segments at once. Our high earners market share went from the mid-20s range to less than 3 in a single period, and we didn't gain nearly enough in the professionals market to make that worth our while. Regarding segmentation, the Chapter 7 lecture taught us that when defining a segment, ask these questions. Does it have definable characteristics? Can customers there be profitably persuaded to buy our product? Is the market opportunity large enough? We should have looked back at that lesson before entering the explorers market. The segment wasn't big enough to justify the cost of entry. We did poorly there. I think we could have, even if we had made better advertising commercial team decisions. As far as product goes, we learned in Chapter 9 the importance of keeping our products distinct and your message sharp. We did that well with Noon, and to a lesser degree with Nova, but we failed to do this with our other 2 offerings. Regarding Nova, there were some product stories that we could have been told better. If we had a chance to do this over again, we would focus a lot more on points of differentiation, especially as the product matured. A lot of our competition focused on building up power and price of their products through R&D projects, but we think power and price became points of parity, especially with the introduction of LOVA in the high earners market. The real point of differentiation for our product was its superior design, and it also had a pretty good display. Looking back, I think we could have touted our points of differentiation a little bit more. Our biggest product challenge, other than managing R&D projects, was trying to gauge customer demand and set production targets. We'd start with a baseline, but it was difficult to figure out how much share we would take or lose in a given period. We did a better job of this with Noon because we had the law of large numbers working in our favor. Our production could be off by tens of thousands in units, and it was still within the 20% of the period's unit sales.
Okay, so let's shift gears and talk about price. We learned way back in week 3 that in order to sell, you need to convince customers that your product's benefits are greater than the costs. So we did that early in the contest, and I think we lost sight of it later on. Now, I would say we did have clear pricing objectives for each of our products. We went after share with Noon, current profit with Nova, a low price point with Nolo, and a market price point for Knox. We also differentiated our pricing policies pretty well. I'll give you an example with Nova. We kept a slightly higher price and were very careful not to start a price war because our per unit costs were higher than everyone else's. Again, where we messed up was focusing on price to the detriment of benefits. When we redid Nova, high earners saw that product as cheap. This is after we spent a lot of effort over multiple periods to be seen as the Cadillac offering. And as a result, we wrecked our brand image for that market. And then with Savers, the bargain hunters out there, we tried to undercut everyone on price, but too much. Instead, we should have priced the product in line with what customers expected to pay, and I think we would have sold more.
Now let's take a look at place. Let's start with our distribution channels. Overall, our goal was to keep our commercial spending roughly in line with the competition. For the most part, we did that. We were very competitive with the top teams, even though we ended the competition with 3 products instead of our competition's 4 or 5. But in terms of overall spend, we didn't do a good enough job keeping up. We let T-Mobile back in the game, and this is partly because they ramped up their spending on commercial salespeople, especially mass merchandisers. We finished 3rd overall in mass merchandisers spending, and we should have been number 1. Let's also take a look at our coverage. We could have focused a lot more on our distribution KPIs found in our company scorecard. This chart pretty much explains the missed opportunity in distribution. We lost no sales in periods 1 through 3 because we had plenty of coverage. Our coverage continued to build through period 4, and then we began to lose sales because we didn't keep this as a competitive advantage. Lastly, let's focus on inventory. One good thing we did was not lose many sales due to not making enough product. The only time that happened was period 3. In all other periods, we were fine. We did, however, let our inventory holding costs build in the later half of the competition. In retrospect, we could have been more successful if we focused on these KPIs.
All right, lastly, let's talk about promotion, especially advertising. And we did fairly well with advertising until we were outspent late in the game, especially by Team L. But first, let's talk about what we did well. Early on, we built awareness for all of our products, and we supported each with a healthy budget. With Nova, we were good too. We were focused our ad message on a perceived power problem that we had very early on, to the point where we had completely overcome that by the middle of the simulation. But our biggest mistake was not spending more to protect our Noon franchise. If we did nothing else, we could have locked up the competition by more heavily promoting our #1 brand. And we knew this, and yet we compromised Noon by promoting upstart brands too aggressively. We were concerned at the time that 80% of the target market already knew about Noon, so we should focus on brand awareness elsewhere. But as we learned, advertising is more than building brand awareness. And we know that now. I would say we could have, and we should have spent more on ad research in general. I think that could have helped us counter campaigns from competitors such as Solo in the shoppers market. The only market where we truly wasted advertising dollars was with Nolo, our Savers offering. In particular, we made a big mistake in period 4 there. We thought we'd announce our offering to the world, spend $3 million or so on ads, price it lower than everyone else, and we were going to nail it. But it didn't work that way. We didn't explain why we were any different than anyone else in that market. Just going after awareness against entrenched competitors was a mistake. And that did nothing to take share away from Locke, the ultimate champion in that market. As the KPI shows, we had that right for a while, but then we faltered at the end. So to sum up our experience with MarkStrat, our competition did a better job focused on price and the other 4 attributes, especially in the period's final weeks. But we did learn a lot, especially not only from our early successes, but from our late mistakes. And we were a little bit volatile, but I think we did learn more than arguably some of the other teams as a result. For Team National, this is Mike Tarsella.
And this is Jason Fisk.
Thank you.